This is Sporting Life.
Hello, welcome back to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. Now, I'm told we're building a reputation for being a shining beacon of hope for all things positive, but a quick glance at the three faces before me suggests we might be reverting to type this week as I welcome in David Johnson, Billy Nash and Graham Cunningham. In fairness, we are going to start on a relative low note today, and I'll come to you first, GC. It was announced on Sunday that we'd lost a flat start almost before the season had begun, really. The death of Highfield Princess has touched an awful lot of people, it seems.
Yeah, rightly so. So sad. Not a great deal to add. What I can add is just observing the human element at first hand. It was in Hong Kong last December. John Fairley, Highfield Princess's owner, was there with practically all his family, his daughters, their husbands, all the grandchildren. And it just rammed home in that moment the pure joy that a really, really good racehorse can bring to people locally, nationally, internationally. And I couldn't help thinking the other day, John Quinn, Sean Quinn, Jason Hart, John Fairley, the kids, the grandkids. How do you tell them? How do you tell them that Highfield Princess is no longer around? It's a very, very hard game. But she was a terrific filly, fantastic flag bearer for the North, at home and abroad, Breeders' Cup, Hong Kong, etc. And always giving her best, not always winning. That's what being a really good racehorse is about, bouncing back. And she was a crackerjack in every way.
And David, that season in 2022, when you just don't see that sort of superiority in the sprint division too often, do you? She went from winning it was actually the Fillies and Mares Condition Stakes at Newcastle on the Good Friday, which I'm sure we'll come to, but she went into the Duke of York, she won there, finished sixth in the Platinum Jubilee at Royal Ascot, and then rattled off the Maurice de Guise, the Nunthorpe, the Flying Five. What a year that was. And she was still doing it just last season in back to her best, seemingly, in the Abbey. A real once-in-a-lifetime horse.
Yeah, she looked phenomenal, didn't she, when she went back to the Duke of York off the all weather, and she produced a kind of performance that I remember handicapping and thinking, well, is it really as good as it looked? It can't be. She's a relatively exposed mare. Look at all the racing that she's had, and by goodness did she prove me wrong, like you say, in the Maurice de Guise, Nunthorpe and the Flying Five. And at that stage you would have totally understood if Connections had decided to draw stumps with her and send her off to stud. But I guess when you've got a mare like her that had come from the background that she had, you could spend your life trying to breed something as good as what she was, and you'd keep coming up short. So, we're lucky that she did race on as what she did, and it is just a crying shame that, she went out in the manner that she has done, sadly.
And David's touched on it there, Billy. We have seen it occasionally, haven't we, with horses starting at real lowly beginnings, rated in the sort of 50s and 60s and going on to be champions. Anything spring to mind for you, Bill?
Doesn't happen often, Matt, but full disclosure, I had to do a bit of a double take when you brought up this fella's name this morning. It goes back a while, but San Sebastian, he was no Highfield Princess. He did win one Group 1, but he started off winning a handicap at Sligo off 47. He rattled up a four-timer that year for Michael Grassick. He used to carry the very famous, at the time, Michael Watt colours, the navy and white checks with the green hat. He was, I suppose, the horse that probably got Eddie Ahern rolling. He was the one that really put Eddie on the map. He ended up winning an Ascot Stakes and the Queen Alexandra from Michael Grassick. And again, like you mentioned him to me this morning, Matt, like it just goes to show how, it's very hard to keep track of all these horses. I was actually at Ascot when he won the Queen Alexandra, and I'd completely forgotten about the horse. But he went to John Dunlop after that. He won a Cadran for John Dunlop, actually finished placing it again the following year, and ended up winning over hurdles in France. He ended his career in Auteuil winning over hurdles. So, remarkable racehorse back in the day. Like you said, it doesn't happen often, but there have been the odd exampple, all right, yeah.
You've already given away my homework.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I came up with a few Barney Curly horses that did it in reverse, that were group horses that ended up winning races off marks in the 50s, mind.
Just on that Cadran, there were more recent winners of the Cadran, weren't there? Obviously, Princess Zoe and the likes of Sergeant Cecil. I'm pretty sure they were rated in the 60s as well before going on to win that race. So one of those races. I'm sure John and Sean Quinn are going to bounce back from this. Certainly if history is anything to go by, they've got Tropez Power, I think, coming up this weekend at Newcastle. which we will look ahead to. But
Can I
first,
toss in one more? Perhaps the most
please do.
the most relevant comparison to Highfield Princess, and you've got to have almost as many grey hairs as me to remember, is Sober, David Chapman, Dandy Nichols, who I always love digging back into the old time form manuals. On her last of 9 starts as a 2-year-old, she made no impression off bottom weight in a Musselburgh nursery. As a 3-year-old, and she was a bit like Highfield Princess, electric from the gate, tremendous easygoing speed. I think she won, was it 11 of her 14 starts? 11 of 14 starts, bolted up in the Stewards' Cup, won the Scarborough Stakes, had a dig against some of the best, came back the year after, was even better, ran really well in the Nunthorpe, won the Scarborough Stakes, all sorts of big sprints, and carrying the flag for the North in a lot of big races. So I think people who remember Sober and remember Highfield Princess will draw very clear parallels between those two.
Was she 70s or 80s, do you see?
She was 82 and 83 when she was really flying. Dandy Nichols, looking tiny on top of this big powerful chestnut filly, and just pedal to the metal right from minute 1, gunner, and very few could get by. It took like crackerjacks like Habibti, real champion sprinters to master her when she was right.
No doubt Dandy's love affair with the Stewards' Cup started around that time as well. Let's look back on some of the action from the Lincoln meeting then. 2 days at Doncaster. The flat sort of briefly gets going again, doesn't it, David? And it's fairly hard to imagine we saw real superstars in action at Doncaster. Certainly when it comes to the classics or anything, I wouldn't have thought we saw anything of that ilk. But Doncaster mile winner Charin, he ran to a big number, David, with time form.
Yeah, reasonably big, 120. I think it's part of the reason we get so excited about Doncaster is it's a bit of a feast after such a long famine, isn't it? But like you say, in terms of where it sits in the grand scheme, it's not hugely significant. And Charin was able to take advantage of a relative drop in class. This was a horse that had been doing quite a lot of bumping heads against proper horses at Group 1 level last year, wasn't he? Ran in, just touched off in the Greenham, ended up going in the Guineas, Irish Guineas, St James's Palace, that kind of route, and running well in all of them. And very much appreciated the drop down in grade to this listed race, and won it with the kind of performance that you might expect a horse that had got form in Group 1 company to be able to do. And I think he's going to step back up to a Group 2 company at Sandown next and hopefully go to the Lockinge, I think is the plan. And there just aren't that many top quality milers around at the moment, are they, amongst the older horses? So you can sort of see why Connections have got him out early and they're going down that kind of route with him.
Yeah, Paddington retired, Tahira retired. So you're right that there might be a bit of hay to be made early on in the season with Charin. Big Rock, tremendous on soft ground. Will we see him in Britain in the short term? So there's an opportunity for that horse at the moment.
We're going to have a bit of a jockey section briefly because the story there, GC, was a big welcome back seemingly for Sylvester de Sousa, something of a prodigal son. He's a tricky one to age, isn't he? He's one of those sports people I find it quite hard to age, but I believe he's 40 odd now. He's back. He seems as popular as ever. He's clearly got a decent agent and potentially a title bid brewing here.
Well, it's very hard to say. I don't think Buick will be going bombs away this year. Oisin Murphy said if there are good rides to be taken abroad, he'll take them. Ross Orion is firmly on the up. But it's interesting with Sylvester because we know that he knows what it takes to win a title. Will he get the support? It was very interesting to me that he rode Charin, even though David Egan was available. David Egan had been riding that horse pretty much all last year, and they chose Sylvester. So Varian obviously likes Sylvester. He's going to use him. I think Andrew Balding's going to use him. He'll get plenty of rides from the Johnsons, and that door's opened a little more widely with the news about Ben Curtis. So very early days. My early suspicion is that I think 135 won the title last year. I think 120 might get it done this time around, and with the right support, Sylvester's capable of certainly cracking the 100 mark.
I think
And let's
James Doyle was unavailable at the weekend, wasn't he? I don't know if he's still got a little bit of an injury or something, but I think he's going to step in to take the vast majority of the variant rides, isn't he? When his Wathnon retainer allows him. So be just interesting to see how that goes and whether he's going to really go for a title bid this year.
But he's really hungry, Sylvester, and I'm told that if the opportunity is there, he's going to give it a right go. He's hungry to make his mark again.
And on Curtis, you mentioned him briefly. He's going to pursue his career in the US for the foreseeable. He sort of carved out a real name for himself in the North, certainly, hasn't he, over the years?
Yeah, he's ridden over 1,000 winners. So he's, there's significant losses when you think, that Bentley and that Atsini in particular going really well in Hong Kong. Martin Harley is, he's travelled. There are losses to the weighing room, but Britain, via Ireland, by and large, tends to produce a lot of good quality jockeys, but it's just a reflection of the economic climate. He's had 40-odd winners at Fairgrounds in New Orleans, Ben Curtis, in 4 months or thereabouts, and he's racked up $1.5 million in prize money for connections, which is pretty much what he earned for a full year in Britain last year when I think he rode 100 winners again. So financially, in terms of the grind, jockeys in Britain, it is a grind of a job. And I think they just raced Thursday, Friday, Saturday in New Orleans there. So you can absolutely understand why he wants to seize that opportunity.
Yeah, he spoke to the Racing Post in January, didn't he? And, he's pointing out the weather, far less travelling, better prize money, not racing every day. He's 34 now. He's got a young family. You get the impression it was now or never. And, you really hope that everything works out well for him.
We certainly do. Back to Egan then. Obviously, focused very much on the new job. He wasn't riding Cherrin, as we said. Managed to land the Lincoln for Kia Jarabkin, which must have gone down very well. Mr. Professor, he went through the soft ground really well, as he had done at Goodwood last year. Billy, I'm sure we'll come to the good stuff at Naas shortly, but did you have half an eye on the Lincoln?
Just half an eye, Matt. I was keeping a close eye on Chaz Esme. I was very surprised at how short he went off. And I thought for a long way he was going to be competitive. I see he returned lame, so he's a horse that's had a lot of his issues in the past. He fractured a pelvis as a 3-year-old, so I don't know, will we see much more of him? But yeah, I had just a brief eye on the race, Matt. Very good winner, but I'm sure DJ can fill you in the details of that much better than I could.
Yeah, I just wondered if either of you wanted to flag her up anything in behind. I thought Thunderball ran quite well with a run now under his belt.
The one I like, Matt. It seemed a race that was very well suited to the hold-up horses, and therefore he did really well to last right on the sharp end for a long way. So he's the type of horse who should be able to snag another good handicap this year.
I just think the concern with that then now is how it's not going to go under the radar, because I think we were all going to mention exactly the same horse for pretty much the same reason.
I did think Navajo ran a big race, Matt. He's an ex-Irish horse, was here with Johnny Murta and Ray Cody. A little bit unlucky in that he won a conditions race at Gordon last year, which kind of screwed up his handicap mark a small bit. He got put up quite a bit for it, so it'll be interesting to see if he can kick on from here. But that was a very encouraging first start for James Horton, so there could be a big pot in him maybe,
Yeah, definitely James Horton, a name to note, now back in Newmarket, I believe. We also saw Montasib won the Camage Trophy, a very mature sort of ride, I thought, from Kieran Fallon, which is only going to see his stocks rise over the coming weeks and months, no doubt. Decent horse on his day. Marshman brought his A game as well in second, just getting nabbed late on. He's pretty useful on his day. I think Nick Bradley, for the owners, was very bullish afterwards, looking to kick on with him. How do you reflect on that, GC, the Camage?
Well, Montasib's been really revitalised, reinvented since he's come back to 6 furlongs. And it was a very, very cool, silky ride from Fallon. I thought Marshman was the one to take away. I think he ran well in the Palace House Stakes at Newmarket, that horse. I had him laid, so you always know when they're travelling really well if you've laid him, and he ran a belter. He went down fighting, and I think stiff 5 at Newmarket. I think he could run a really big race. He won a group race in France in the 3rd week in April, so he could go back to France, but I would think Guineas weekend would be a nice slot for Marshman.
And David, I know Dan Barber was on the Nick Luck Daily on Tuesday, I think it was, talking about Dylan Cunningham. He made a good impression last year and obviously hit the ground running, winning the Brocklesby. Another horse ran well as well. He's had that Ace captain won again at Newcastle the other night. Definitely a name to note, do you think?
He does look to be making a real fist of things, isn't he? I mean, he's not a newcomer as such. He's training for many years in South Africa before he came over here, but he's definitely making a name for himself. And obviously, like you say, won the Brocklesby. I don't think it was a good Brocklesby this year. When you look at the kind of ratings that we normally dish out to the Brocklesby winners, we've got the miniature only on a rating of 81. I mean, last year's was a weak race as well, but think back when Persian Force was winning, he was rated in the 90s, and Chipotle, he went on to sort of be listed class, didn't he? So that was probably a much better renewal than this year's. But yeah, he's 2-year-olds obviously forward, and he's obviously able to place them quite well as well. So yeah, he's definitely a trainer to be interested in the opening weeks of the season.
Agreed. Drives you crackers though when a 16-to-1 chance wins, and the trainer's quote says, "That win was expected." If it was that expected, surely it wouldn't have been going off as a 16-to-1 chance.
Like I say, he's made a strong start, and he's backing himself there, I think, GC. The Irish flat season, not quite in full swing, Billy, but we've had some good stuff, and Nace on Sunday, which we touched on. Purple Lily really stood out, seemingly earning a shot at a classic trial now.
Oh, I think she has to, Matt. Yeah, look, she was an impressive on her debut at Galway last year. She backed it up. Nice bit of placing by Paddy Toomey to find a winner's race. There are not too many of them in Ireland, and he had been quite keen to get her out. So, she ran to a time form rating of 101 with a P, which is nothing excessive. But still, the fact that she beat a couple of colts, Portland of Aidan O'Brien's, he'd been second in the Criterium International at St. Cloud last year, so that gives the form a good bit of substance. She won it nicely. It's difficult to know, just looking at her breeding, where she's going to end up. She's by Calix, and not a massive amount of stamina on the dam side of her pedigree. Looking at her at the weekend, I mean, it was really testing ground at Navan over a mile, so you'd imagine she'd get a mile and a quarter. Whether she'll stay any further than that, I don't know. But the really interesting thing about her is that Paddy Toomey had a very strong bunch of 2-year-old fillies last year, so it'll be very interesting to see where they all slot in now. Obviously, Purple Lily we've seen, but the likes of One Look, Porter's Place, a Lilac Rolla, those kind of fillies, it'll be interesting to see how he splits them up and what sort of pecking order he has put them in, But yeah, Paddy Toomey, he's had 4 runners in Ireland this flat season. 2 of them have won, 2 of them have finished third. So clearly his string is much more forward than you'd expect him at this time of the year. The other notable performance from Nace at the weekend was in the Madrid handicap. Jack Davison's Take Me to Church absolutely bolted up in that handicap debut. But I would just query that form slightly, Matt. There was, I think, 12 in the race. Only 2 of them had been campaigned on the all-weather during the winter. One of those was a mile out of the handicap, so you couldn't fancy him. The other one was Take Me to Church, who had won his last 2 starts at Dundalk pretty impressively. And I just think maybe that fitness edge was probably a big factor on the day. The ground being so bad, I think the fitness was a big advantage. He's been put up 15 pounds by the handicapper for that, so handicaps are probably a thing of the past for him now. He's going to be running off a mark of 101. He's going to find life a bit more difficult. But having said that, since they put the cheek pieces on, he's run 4 times and he's won 3 of them, finished second the other occasion. So he's clearly a horse going the right direction. But the question is, where will they go from here? He'll probably have to run in something like a Tetrack or a Gladness now,
You might not get this, lads. But I was going to say that Take Me to Church hosed up, but he actually hosied it up. Get it?
Got it, GC, got it. DJ doesn't know what you're talking about. Look at him.
I'll smile along politely.
Just
likewise. Davison, he's not got a big string, has he, Billy? But he did quite well with that Money Esther a couple of years ago, and looks to definitely have another nice one here. I did read that he was looking to sell Take Me to Church. I think this was towards the back end of last year, so I'm not sure how long he'll be around. But let's roll back a little bit further now.
Gemma Tutty. We should mention Gemma Tutty, Matt.
Gemma Tutty, yes, of course.
2
won
winners.
the Constellation race, and then the other one ran quite well in the Lincoln as well.
Looked back smiling, and then she had a nice winner on Sunday with King of Spain. And you're looking at value trainers, both pretty much bargain buys. I think 10 grand for Look Back Smiling has won 60, 70 odd now. King of Spain, I think, cost in the 30s. He looks at pretty valuable prospect. So she is a trainer to keep an eye on in the North this year, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. A far more established yard in the North. Carl Burke's got this Night Raider. If we just go back to him, because David, he won. Well, it was last Wednesday, the evening we recorded the previous podcast, so we haven't really touched on him. But he was deeply impressive. What did you make of him, and what do you make of the 2,000 guineas quotes for him?
Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? You sort of got to look at it through two prisms, really. Very impressive. You know, he's 2 from 2. And as far as all-weather novice winners go, you're sort of looking at him as something out of the ordinary. But it's not as though it's gone under the radar. I think his time form rating is 105p. It could be slightly higher than that if you give him full credit for the sectional upgrade. But I think he's third favourite for the 2,000 guineas, which it's hard not to think that isn't an overreaction, given he's yet to run on turf. He's raced only at 7 furlongs at the minute. And that pedigree is pretty speedy. You wouldn't say he's a natural guaranteed miler on his breeding, would you? So it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up more like something like a Jersey horse than a strong Guineas contender at this stage. But yeah, I don't want to knock him because you can't fault what he's done. But equally, I want to just rein it back a little bit because, you know, he's not done enough to be third favourite for a Guineas.
No, the half brother far above, he ran over 7 furlongs a couple of times and then really dropped back to 6. And you could almost see that with this horse towards the end of the season. We could do with Ed Chamberlin back, couldn't we, with his Clipper Logistics sources. But I think they are in for a big year anyway, aren't they, regardless, because they've obviously got Fallen Angel, who I believe, is she going straight for the 1,000 guineas?
Yes, Racecourse Gallop.
Racecourse Gallop, straight to Newmarket. Fantastic. Okay, so we have a few bits to flag up from the jumps action at Newbury last Saturday as well. Now, Paul Nicholls' Regent Stroll hasn't actually jumped anything yet, but he had a very big weight in the valuable bumper on the card, and he got the job done nicely. What price he becomes the yard's latest Challow winner in the autumn? He looks the part, doesn't he, GC?
He does, yeah. Physically, he dwarfed most of those opponents. They were younger. That's why he was giving away penalty and weight for age. But he beat them really decisively, and you know he'll be winning novice hurdles next year. It's just a question of how high he can fly.
Yeah, I'm not sure, just while we're on National Hunt, I'm not sure if you caught up with the full Look On Sunday interview, but obviously Dr. Richard Newland was on, and he was on the line anyway. And as soon as he came on, you could just tell there was a look of humble pie about him. He'd been, I don't know if he'd had some strongly worded letters, but it started with an apology, GC.
This was tremendous TV. First point to make, I'll get through this quickly. He couldn't be as weird as he had been in print in the original feature. But he gave it a good go.
Close.
And I'll tell you why. The 4 to 11 favourite obliged with some of my best friends are Irish, or a variation on that theme. My aim was not to upset them. Pretty startling thing to say, given that he'd hinted at doping, suggested they should be banned, and the horse race in Ireland should pay back all the prize money they've won. Why would anyone get upset by that? This was good, because he was shifty, wasn't he? He was shifty, he was edgy, and he chuttled away merrily, while saying, James Mangan shut down a lot of things I said, and fair enough. It bloody well was fair enough. He seemed worryingly unsure of his facts, and no wonder, and this is the key point again, because some of his so-called facts that he's thrown into the mix are utterly bogus. For example, connections of Irish horses are likely to receive 10 million from UK jump races this year. It's only just over half that at the moment. Now, they're going to snag plenty at Aintree, but it's a bogus fact. And they're everywhere these days, fake news, etc. Also, get this. He said there've been 12, he's talking about jumps. Nobody's mentioned flat here. He said there've been 1,200 Irish runners in Britain this season. There hasn't. It's under 700. And most of all, utter cobblers. There could be 2,000 next year. If there are even 1,200, I'll give up the game. He's throwing utterly bogus facts into the mix, hoping people will believe him. And as he said, these are only ideas. Everyone's entitled to ideas, but decent ideas need to be backed up by facts. And he's miles off the pace.
Billy, on behalf of Irish professionals, apology rejected?
I didn't listen to it, Matt.
Good man.
I didn't be bothered. But yeah, look, I have to echo everything GC says there. It's quite Trumpian, isn't it, on the stuff that he's coming out with?
It's so funny though. He's so funny. He was laughing, chuckling away.
Yeah.
He didn't stand by any of his points at all. No, he was chuckling away as if it was jolly good fun. Fantastic telly.
On a slightly more serious note, I think we need to mention Daryl Jacob, obviously Sport and Life columnist. He suffered a broken collarbone in a bit of a, well, it was fairly innocuous. Not many of these things are innocuous, are they? But it's nightmare timing, essentially, with just Aintree around the corner. So do get well soon, Daryl, if you're listening. Hopefully you'll be right for a ride or three come Punchestown, because probably a few good spares going for Munir and Suede at that festival at the end of the season. Talking of, well, he's going to miss Aintree, isn't he? But we did see just earlier this week, the Grand National was whittled down a little bit more. We've got, 17 have gone, and the Panda Boy Dream DJ, has this taken a step closer? I think, am I right in thinking he's number 35 and just needs one to slide away?
Yeah, should be good. I'm afraid I missed the price on it. Last time I looked, it was about 12 to 1. So project still.
Sorry, I thought you were on.
David, don't miss another big winner. You missed Great Dawning at Cheltenham because you were too fussy.
Oh,
Just do not miss these big winners because of tiny little things like a couple of points here and there. Get on.
10 stone 3 is going to look fairly rosy, isn't it? I suspect. Let's just. I know there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to this whole Aintree meeting, but Billy, GC, anything else to flag up? Just an angle in mind for Aintree yet?
Not particularly, Matt. Just looking at the national again. Am I right in thinking there's going to be at the moment something like 28 of the 34 trained in Ireland?
Minimum.
It's going to be like very, very top heavy with the Irish. Just having a quick look at the market during the week, the one that stood out to me is Capodanno, 20 to 1. I think he's a huge price. I know he possibly didn't stay last year, but I'm kind of putting it down to the fact that he had an interrupted campaign. I think he's a better horse this time around, and he's a class angle. I think at 20 to 1, I'll be tempted to back him again this year, Matt.
Interesting with Mark Walsh, isn't it? Because he'd have options. Presumably, I have not got the race card to hand. Could he even ride Meeting of the Waters, or is that a bit low for him? I'm not sure.
That'll be pushing a bit, I'd say. Yeah.
I Am Maximus is the other one.
Yeah. So he definitely has options, and like you said, it'll be interesting to see which way he picks. But either way, I think Capodanno certainly will do for me at that price.
I think I read an interview with Willie somewhere, perhaps it was on Sporting Life, and he suggested that he thought Mark Walsh would probably lean towards Capodanno rather than the other one. So
Self-preservation. I have Maximus.
Yeah. There is a bit of that, yeah.
I've got a little point to make on this, and an angle that I dug out this morning. I think it's interesting. Now, full disclosure, someone I like and respect got in touch with me after last week's podcast and said, you were unfair on Julie Harrington, suggesting that she should be laughed at for saying that British trainers, German trainers, have more than a match for their Irish counterparts. And when someone you like and respect pulls you up like that, you do start to think, and I did. And then here comes the national. Now, the core of this conversation, I don't want to divulge too much because I'm writing a bit about this in what should be a highly readable national file for next weekend. But the national is, the biggest handicap going over jumps. The core of the argument is that the very best horses are being funneled into a few yards very early in the piece. Now, have a look at a lot of those main Irish national contenders. They were all buyable and for not a lot of money. I'll give you a few examples. Vanillier, €40,000. Noble Yates went for $6,500 at one point. Minella Indo, 24,000. Marla Mission, I think it's 4,200. Galvin, €34. Mr. Incredible, 75. Meeting of the Waters, €18,000. Panda Boy, €31,000. Cocoa Beach, 38. Ain't That a Shame, 45. Adamantly Chosen, 24. Chemical Energy, 38. The Golfer, €5,000. Glenn Goulet, €20,000. Now, they were all buyable. But the fact is, they were all bought by Irish trainers of varying stripes and they've made it to Aintree. They've reached the rating necessary to get into the world's most famous steeplechase. It's pretty telling data, that, don't you think?
And the irony of your pal, Iron Maximus GC, who was Nicky Henderson's, and he's slipped through the net.
Well, he's had various sales, obviously. He was, I'm sure he cost the late Mike Gretsch a fair bit of money when he bought him, and a fair bit more when he was sold on to JP McManus. But all those horses went to public auction and were bought for not a great deal of money, and they've all made the cut for the National. Where are the Brits?
Right, let's look ahead. While we're on the National Hunt stuff, it's the Easter Festival at Fairyhouse. Billy, it's quite nice, actually. You've got 2 Irish Nationals, essentially, this year, haven't you? What are you looking forward to most ahead of this year's meeting at Fairyhouse? Always good stuff, isn't it?
Always good stuff, Matt. But it comes very close to Cheltenham this year, which is going to obviously have an impact, I think, on the Fairyhouse Festival this year. There's only something like 2 weeks between them, so usually there's a bit more of a gap. So it'll be interesting to see whether many of the horses that have run at Cheltenham will reappear again this weekend. Just looking at the National itself, I think the team is unexposed novice chasers seem to be the way that people want to go. Nick Rocket leads the market. He's 7-2. He's very short, but he has a very, he's got obvious claims. Obviously trained by Willie Mullins. He's unexposed both as a chaser and as a stayer, but 7-2 looks very skimpy. You have horses like Arthur Dark, who falls into that category as well. Gavin Cromwell's Yeah Man, who won at Haydock last time. The way the conditions are really going to suit him. It's going to be heavy ground at Fairyhouse, which is most unusual for an Irish National. Fairyhouse is one of these tracks that does dry very quickly, but we've had so much rain, Matt, and there's so much more forecast that it is going to be a heavy ground Irish National. That will suit the likes of Yeah Man. Senior Chief is a novice that I think would definitely have a chance for Henry de Bromhead. He's one that I think I was kind of thinking they might go to Cheltenham with him for one of the handicaps there. They've obviously held him back here with this race in mind, so I wouldn't put anyone off him. But just looking at the prices, I think Churchstone Warrior at 16-1 is a bit overpriced. If he can come back to the form he was in last year, he was a really good novice last year. He won the 10 up at Navan. He beat Malheur Mission actually that day. He's only had this exactly, yeah. So he's only had 2 runs this year. Things haven't really gone to plan for him. He unseated at the second at Punchestown in his reappearance. And then on his second start, they ran him in the Savills Chase at Leopardstown over Christmas. He just wasn't good enough and he was pulled up. But if you can put a line through that, if he comes back to his novice chase form, and he was a very consistent horse all the way up until this season, I just think he's probably a bit of value at that sort of price. Trip and ground will be no issue to him. He's trained by Jonathan Sweeney, who doesn't have a big string, but does extremely well with the horses he gets. So I think at that sort of price, he's the kind of one I'd be looking at. But like I said, whatever you're going to be backing this weekend, make sure it acts on the ground because it is going to be heavy.
Now, you mentioned a few unexposed novices there, but I'll let you into a secret. I had a dream the other night that Ruby Walsh came out of retirement to ride Any Second Now, and he went off about 2-1 favourite for this. So look out for the market plunge on the old boy just before final declarations.
What were you eating before you went to bed, Matt?
Just look at his handicap. How is he rated 140 all of a sudden? The British handicapper gave him 159 for this year's Classic Chase at Warwick, and Ed Walsh spat the dummy out and decided to run at Fairyhouse instead. Yeah, 149 for the old boy. I think he's going back to the 1970s for the last 12-year-old winner of the Irish Grand National. But I don't know, obviously, by the time we record the next one, David, GC, this will all be over. Have you got to throw one into the mix for the Irish National, or are you happy to move on?
I haven't studied it, but it's a €500,000 handicap with no Brits in sight. And if you want to read a really, really precise analytical use of data, have a look at Graham North, Bradford Elvis, as we're contractually obliged to call him. Have a look at his Jumps, Pace, Maps piece on Sporting Life and tell me what on earth is going on. €500,000, so much more valuable than any handicap at Cheltenham, which the Brits did extremely well in, by the way. No Brits on deck.
Well, there are Brits on deck at Newcastle, Lingfield and Chelmsford. That's a little bonus, isn't it, to have 3 all-weather meetings on Good Friday? But David, it is all-weather finals day at Newcastle. It's still, I suppose it's still a relatively new concept, but it seems to have worked very well in recent years. I like the fact that it's held at Newcastle. It's a fair testing track. What are the latest tweaks to this program, though, and why haven't they all been met with universal approval?
Yes, so like you say, the concept, I think, has been around 10 or 11 years now. It obviously began its life in Lingfield, didn't it? I think this is perhaps about the third year or so that it's come up to Newcastle. The main change this year is that most of the championship, well, all of the championships are now handicaps as opposed to level weights contests. And I think that was in response to some of the races last year and perhaps the year before, just not filling and quite being as competitive as what you would have hoped. And
we've heard this before, haven't we?
Exactly, yeah. So, they've seen the problem, they've made changes, and I think they'll be happy with what they've got. The average field size this year, I've noticed, is up. Well, I say noticed. It was pointed out in a tweet by somebody else. It's gone up to 12 from 8.43. And against that, the average rating has come down slightly. We've got a rating of 97 last year, and it's down to 94 this year. So there's you'd argue a small drop in quality, but overcompensated for in the competitiveness. So yeah, it's really competitive. I think the smallest field size this year is 9, and it's going to be very difficult to find winners, I think.
Well, I've seen you rapidly refreshing the pages for the final decks coming through. I see. Hopefully, you are going to be able to flag one up to us in a few minutes. But there's a great feature on Sporting Life for the minute with the Horse Watchers team. They seem to be absolutely empty in the stable for the weekend. They've got runners across Lingfield and Newcastle. They've obviously got this Penzance, haven't they? He seems to be the one that's on a real upward curve, up in the weights again, but runs in the Easter Classic.
In the Easter Classic, yeah. Like you say, the Horse Watchers, if there's good prize money to be had, that they're trying the best to have a good go at it. And Penzance is a strong contender for this race. Definitely, his form has really continued to go the right way since they got hold of him from Simon and Ed Crisford. He's won his last 4. Obviously, he's just creeping up the handicap. You wouldn't be certain that he's reached his limit yet, and I'm sure he'll go very well.
Just in the 440, the mile race, I just thought one of theirs might be worth mentioning because he's going to be more like a 20-25 to 1 shot. Is this horse called Zealot, who has had the 3 runs back this winter. Fairly quiet runs, but they've all been at Wolverhampton or Lingfield, those tight turning tracks. And you go back to his Newcastle form, his record there is much stronger. He's 2 from 2 at Newcastle. So Zealot at a huge price could be worth a look. We've got plenty of interest. We've got Irish interest. We've got runners from France. GC, there's an Antoine Griezmann runner as well.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at this because I've been looking at the Dubai World Cup card. Now, I know it's not that meeting on Saturday, star-studded though it is, will not do 10% of the turnover that Musselburgh and the all-weather meetings do, etc. But it is a fantastic card on the step. I would advise people to have a look at it. I don't know what to make of the Dubai World Cup. It will depend how the track's riding. You can come from way back to win that race, as Ushba Tesoro showed last year. He's back for another crack with his Saudi conqueror, Senor Buscador. But have a look about the turf races. That Gold Cup, the staying race, is wide open. We've got Tower of London, Enemy, Giavalotto, who ran so well to dominate that big race in Saudi. Siskany, who I think won it last race. Trawlerman. The Alcor Sprint, California Spangles, an interesting runner from Hong Kong. Casa Creed from America. The Turf, Lord North, looking for a 4-timer. Nashua, stablemate. Luxembourg, Dodus, high-quality Japanese horse. And the Shima Classic has Gus Rodin, Liberty Island, Emily John, Rebels Romance, Junko, and loads of other Grade 1 winners. That's a spectacular card of Maidan this weekend.
Liberty Island, she's the filly, isn't she, that was second to Equinox? Is this?
Yeah.
I mean, some readers will be slightly surprised that there's a horse shorter than August Rodin, but she's got to be massively respected, hasn't she?
Yeah, she's an exceptional filly. She won the Japanese Triple Crown and did best of the rest behind Equinox. I'm still fascinated. It's been a running theme on this podcast for at least a year, more than a year now. The August Rodin conundrum. Are we expecting him to be linear this year. It's very rare for a crackerjack horse like him to have two absolute blowouts. So, Billy, it's a big day for him this weekend because he needs to show he's trained on. He's up against an exceptional field, and in stallion terms, promoting him on a world stage like this again is very, very important for Aidan and the lads.
It is indeed, yeah. They've taken a big punt, even putting him back into training. I assumed after he won the Breeders' Cup last year that they'd pull up stumps with him, but no, they've decided that there's more to aim for. So yeah, it is a big day for him. It's a big day for the yard as well, because remember, like, this is a meeting that Aidan O'Brien used to absolutely ignore for years and years. I think he has 8 runners at the weekend on Saturday, on the card on Saturday. So he's sending a very strong team, obviously headed by Auguste Rodin. Like you said, it's, you know, the 2 blowouts last year, one of them he was putting down to the ground. That won't be an issue at the weekend. The other one, I think he was trying to blame on travel. So obviously they seem to have rectified that issue. So we will see. But yeah, it's a tough start for him, you know. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. It, like you said, it's a cracking race. But clearly, they think there's more to offer with him. He has had his racecourse gallop. He was at Dundalk, as we saw a couple of weeks ago. So he should go there fighting fit.
And Billy, I sensed I might have just cut you off in your prime when you were just going to talk us through Aidan McGuinness's runners as well at Newcastle on Friday.
Well, look away now, Dr. Richard Newland, because the Irish are coming for all-weather finals day, you know. Pretty strong bunch, actually, Matt. I was just going through the entries earlier on. Pretty strong bunch. Aidan McGuinness, as you mentioned, has a couple. He's got Hod's Girl at Newcastle, who ran well in the race last year. She's very consistent. She'll probably go well again. But the McGuinness horse I'd be most interested in, and intriguingly, he is entered, he's declared twice, is Apache Outlaw. He has him in both Newcastle and Lingfield. He's a horse he got from Joseph O'Brien. He's been doing really well on the all-weather over here. He's won his last 2. He's won by a short head and a half a length. But if you can win Cosley by that margin, he has done it twice. I think he's a really talented horse, Matt. And wherever he turns up, he's got a big chance. DJ mentioned James Doyle earlier on. I see James Doyle is jocked up by Johnny Murtagh in the sprint at Lingfield on a horse called Danbert Diplomat, who was another one that has taken really well to Polytrack in Ireland over the winter. He'd have a big squeak, but there's a, like I said, there's a deep team. Kevin Coleman's Buenavente won at Suddle recently. He's got a chance where he goes. And the Ammo Racing team of Adrian Murray's got a really nice horse called Elegant Man. He's after winning both his starts at Dundalk, finished second in a listed race at Kempton the time in between. He goes to Newcastle, I think it is.
Yeah.
He's a very progressive colt. It looks a tough race, but I'd be very interested to see how he gets on. So could be a good Friday for the Irish this year, Matt.
Yeah, of course, anybody that follows Racing League is well aware of what the Irish can do. The question is, can they do it without Kevin Blake?
The question is, how many follow the Racing League?
Back. Let's cover it back.
Have we bought you enough time, DJ, to flag up a selection? Do you want to throw an all-weather finals selection into the picture?
The interesting race for me is the sprint, and one that catches my eye, and it's this Summercand, who it doesn't appear to be the stable first choice because Danny Tudhope is on Aberama Gold, and he might not even be the stable second choice because Ross O'Ryan is on Misty Grey. But Summercand is back down to a mark of 96 now, which is plenty to work with on his best form. I think he won that race at the York Ebor meeting for the second year on the trot last year off a mark of 102. And it just sort of gradually gone off the boil since then. But there was a lot more to like about his run at Lingfield last time. He was only beaten half a length there by Chipstead and Batal Dubai, who he split. Batal Dubai is amongst the market leaders for this race, whereas Summercand, when I was looking at him earlier in the week, was about a 12-14 to 1 chance. Perhaps people are put off by his record at Newcastle, which, to be frank, is ordinary, but I just wonder if that's just a coincidence, because, you know, you think about all the kind of races that he's run on turf, on all the different kind of tracks, you know, whether they're uphill, downhill, you know, there's no logical reason for why Newcastle would not be suitable for him. You know, he's fully effective on the surface elsewhere as well. So I'm hoping that Summercand can roll back the years. He was a winner of this race at Lingfield when it was a level weights contest, and I think he's handicapped to win it now. It's a handicap at Newcastle.
Summergand, and any second now, we're keeping it fresh here on the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. GC, I'm reliably informed that we're going to end on a high, and you've got a nugget from Musselburgh.
I was hoping to, but I caught up another call before this. But I can say a couple of things. First of all, join me on Racing TV at Musselburgh this weekend. It's a Premier Race Day, so you know it's going to be good. And seriously, it's a very valuable handicaps. And I think lots of people, myself included, will be rooting for the Quins and Jason Hart with JM Jungle in that very valuable Virgin Bet Scottish Sprint Cup. And Timeform, I think, having joint top rated, he's fit and firing after picking up a nice pot in Bahrain, the Sakir race course. So he's a really smooth traveling horse, very consistent. So keep an eye on him. Big weekend coming up. Haven't even mentioned the Challenger Series at Haydock, but it's getting pretty lively at the moment, flat jumps, isn't it?
It certainly is. We're going to leave everyone in peace there for this week. So I'll wish a happy Easter to the three of you. Thanks for your contributions as ever. Good luck to you, listeners, wherever the pin lands this weekend. There's an awful lot of racing all over the place. So pick your battles wisely in Scotland, England, Ireland, and Dubai. And please do gamble responsibly. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion, and tips.